A lot of people believe that time is money, but the truth is that time is infinitely more valuable than money. Time is one of those few resources that is truly finite. You get a limited amount of time. You get 24 hours on the day. You get however many years you get. I think that the average living age is something in the 70s, but some people die sooner than that, unfortunately. Some people live longer than that, though. But regardless, however much time you get is how much time you get. There isn't really a way to buy more time, so to speak. You can always earn more money, you can always get more things, you can always have more stuff. But the thing is that you cannot get more time. There's no way for me to purchase like a 25th hour of the day. A year for me is the same as a year for you, is the same as a year for some random person. And I think a lot of us take time for granted just because of the fact that, you know, we just have it, basically. There's no earning time and there's no losing time except for in the metaphorical sense. But most of us aren't born with money, for instance. Most of us don't come from some sort of Bruce Wayne rich family. And so as a result, I think in many cultures, money is prioritized over time. There's this large emphasis on chasing money and getting your next dollar. And so I think broadly speaking, whenever people think about what's valuable to them, they think about money or things that have some sort of monetary worth. And obviously this is an idea that makes sense. You know, you need money to survive, basically. So I mean, if you don't have money, then you're not going to have much time because you're going to starve to death. If you don't have money for shelter or for food or for resources or whatever, then you're screwed. But at the same time, I don't really think that we appreciate time as a resource and just how valuable it is. They say that time is money, but I think that time is more valuable than money, as I'm saying, but I do think there are some instances where time literally equals money. For instance, in advertising. Most platforms on the web or on the internet have some kind of advertising built into them to make them profitable, YouTube being a prime example of this. And so things work the same way on here as they do any other website. Basically, if you watch ads, then people get paid. Instagram or Facebook make more money and they try to keep you on their platform for longer because the longer you're on their platform, the more ads that they can show you and therefore the more money they can make. But really, I think it's kind of difficult for us to fully understand just how valuable time is because of the fact that it is a human concept, really. And I suppose everything is. I suppose money is a human concept. But I think time is much more difficult to categorize and divvy up than money. With money, you can look at numbers. Money is pure math. You pay this much for groceries, you pay this much for rent, you pay this much for fun, for a ticket or something. And so as a result, it's much easier to pay attention to your money and figure out how exactly to divide it up. But then time is more complicated because of the fact that I think energy plays into things. What I mean by that is that not all time is created equally. So for instance, if you have a day where you got a full 8 hours of rest and you had a good breakfast and you're in a good mood, that is a much more valuable piece of time. That's a much more valuable day than if you got 2 hours of sleep and if you're miserable and if you're angry and if you're stressed out and going through some things. And so I think that's a piece that's oftentimes missing from the entire discussion of time and its value, because I know there are a lot of people out there who feel the same way that I do, which is to say that time is more valuable than money. There are a lot of people who believe that, but at the same time, we don't focus on the energy cost of certain things enough. Energy and our moods obviously affect how exactly we feel about our time and how exactly we use our free time. I've certainly been in this position before where I think to myself, oh, I have the weekend off. I have 48 hours. I have 2 days. And so as a result, I should be able to do a lot, and I can do, you know, a lot of chores and I can do a lot of fun stuff. I can do a lot of work, personal work. But then I think usually what happens for most of us is that if you've been working all week, then you're tired. And so even though you may have big plans for the weekend and you may have set big goals for yourself, you don't always follow up on those plans just because you don't have the energy to do so. You're trying to recover from the previous week. And so I think that makes things a little bit more complicated. I think that makes things difficult. And I think there's the entire matter of mindset and focus. There's this phrase that people have adopted that I actually really like. I don't really understand a lot of Zoomer slang. And that's funny because I am technically a Zoomer, but I don't really understand the slang. And so as a result, sometimes I'll just feel like an old man whenever I hear people say Riz or brain rot. Yacht, the Rizzler, bussin', no cap, for real, for real. Jeez. But one phrase I do really like is the idea of something living in your head rent-free, which is to say that your focus is drawn to something that you don't want it being drawn to. So for instance, you might be thinking about someone you don't like, and then you're just thinking about them all the time and giving them all of your mental energy. And that's not good. That's not good to be dwelling on things and to be distracted because of you're thinking about things that you don't want to be thinking about. And so I think this is something that makes the entire time discussion more complicated, basically, than talking about money. I think time is undeniably more valuable than money, but at the same time, I think it's really difficult to actually execute on that and to make the most of your time. As I'm saying, energy plays into it, and then also just habits play into things. If you're not used to spending your time in valuable, good ways, then I think it can be really difficult to actually make yourself do that. And so as I was discussing, that plays into energy, and so if you're not used to doing good things, basically, that's going to drain your energy quicker than if you were used to it. And so as a result, I think it's really easy to get sucked into other people's plans. I've talked about this before, but I think that if you don't have a plan for yourself, if you don't have a path forward, then inevitably you will be pulled into someone else's plans. As Nietzsche once said, he who does not obey himself will be commanded. As I'm talking about this, I think implicit is the idea that we know what to do with our time. And in my eyes, and a lot of other people's eyes, that's what makes it valuable. I think it's one thing to be doing nothing and then to be pulled into someone else's plan, and to get direction from them. But I think it's a completely different thing to be attempting to do your own thing, to be attempting to pave your own path forward in life, and then to be sucked into someone else's plan. I've seen this before, and this has even happened to me, basically, where you start working a job for the money, and then at some point you get promoted, and then you get promoted again, and you're working this job, you're getting paid more, but you're also moving in a direction that you never planned to. And so it's really easy to end up like the Talking Heads song and to be like, how did I get here? In the eyes of most people, chasing money is kind of just what you do. It's a value that's not really questioned by most people. But money is one of those things that, obviously you need it to survive and you need it if you're trying to do anything fun, but at the end of the day, it's not really something that you can look back on and be proud of. There's this quote, I don't remember who it came from, if it was Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, but one of those old rich dudes said something to the extent that essentially if you spend your entire life chasing money, then you'll just be the richest guy in the graveyard. And again, I want to make it clear, I'm not trying to downplay the necessity of money. You need it to survive, you need it for practical reasons. If you're trying to move forward in any capacity whatsoever, you need money. Money helps. Money is a good thing to have. I just don't think it's a good thing to dwell on. And so that's why I think time is more valuable than money, right? It's a finite resource. You can't get more time. And also, if you want to do literally anything in life, time is the currency that you have to spend. This is one thing that I realized from buying a bunch of books, because honestly, reading is one of the cheaper forms of entertainment. It's not as cheap as playing like a free-to-play video game, for instance, but reading books is typically speaking cheaper than like going to the movies. It's certainly cheaper than going to concerts. But historically speaking, I think reading has been the go-to activity for a lot of people over the last like 400 or 500 years, give or take. And one thing that I've come to realize all too well is the fact that books have a money cost, right? You have to actually exchange currency for the book you are getting, but also they have a time cost. Even a short book still takes a few hours. And as I've said before, as I talked about in my video on reading, basically I think reading is one of the best activities you can do, period. I think exercising is another one of the best activities you can do, period, as I said in another video. But exercising, of course, also includes time. It includes money if you're paying for a gym membership. And then biggest of all, maybe, it requires energy. And it's kind of interesting, I think, how those three things all fit together, money, energy, and time, because I think you can combine like two to get another. So for instance, you'll give your time and energy to get money. You can give your money and time to get energy. And so I mean that in the form of like supplements or exercise. If you rest or you go on vacation or you take a break, you are having to give up money and you're having to give up time to hopefully recharge. And then the last combination of those three is money plus energy equals time. And I think in some ways that's sort of where the equation falls apart, because as I said, you cannot get more time. You can get more free time, you can give up hours at your job. You can choose to work a different job that requires less time. And so I don't know that I can make that equation work perfectly, that money plus energy equals time, because as I'm saying, time is finite. It's impossible to truly get more. You can certainly do some things in an attempt to extend your time. It's been proven time and time again that if you eat healthy, if you're fit, if you take care of yourself, if you get enough sleep every night, you'll live a longer and better life than those who don't do those things. But at the same time, I do think that things are kind of muddy. Again, there's no secret formula to getting more time. There's no way to get 100 years added to your lifespan. There's no amount of money you can pay to live to the next millennium. That's just not how anything works. And so for that reason, I think that sacrificing time is a really difficult pill to swallow, and everyone works, everyone does some kind of job, probably, I don't know. I guess there are some people who don't do anything with their lives at all, but I think most of us have to work and do something. And I do think that the best way to make that sustainable and to make that pill easier to swallow is just by doing something you love. There's that saying that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life, but that's complete bogus, because any job or any activity, YouTube has a lot of stuff associated with it that I don't really care all that much for. There are parts of any job or any work that just aren't fun, but really, time is more valuable than money. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I had an experience basically whenever I was working a job that I hated a couple years ago. I was just miserable at it, and I was just utterly depressed, and I wasn't where I wanted to be in life, and I was just working all the time. And so as a result, I did have money coming in. And so one thing I noticed that I started doing was buying things in an attempt to like sort of fill the void within me, because if you don't have any time but you have money, then That's just kind of what you do. And so I would like buy records, but I wouldn't even have the time to listen to them. And so at the end of the day, I think that time and money are things that are constantly in conflict. I think broadly speaking, you will gain one if you lose the other and vice versa. But all in all, I guess that really what I'm saying with this video is use your time in good ways. Try your best to prioritize time and chasing after what you want in life, as opposed to just chasing money, which I don't think is a good way to live. This is what I got. I'm going to the gym now, as always. So thank you for watching. Have a nice night, and goodbye.